20.
7:20. Couple minutes, I think, to officially begin.
Mike, I do have a statement for public works.
Oh, sure.
And so, I don't know where that is
Oh, I'll hit upon that when I introduce everybody first thing. So I'll mention that, and then you
And then
might,
just go ahead.
interface
well,
right
that's
there.
perfect, yeah, it's very brief.
Yeah, it says, folks, good evening. This is the July 20th, 21 public meeting of East Goshen Township. And in calling the meeting to order, I'd like to start with a pledge of allegiance to our country for the flag. And Derek, would you say the pledge, and then Michelle, if you might have a moment, we have a moment of silence for things we consider at that time.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May you stand, please?
And if we can just take a moment for our first responders to keep them in mind, and especially the healthcare workers taking care of our loved ones. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
See how this is working. Good, good. First, I want to introduce everyone tonight. My colleagues to my left, fellow supervisors Michelle Truitt and John Herzog. We also have David Shuey, our chair, who is, you might have heard, is on the line. He's out of the area, but he'll be an active participant. And we are without Marty Shane today. He is in the process, he's had a health setback, so he's in the process of recuperation. And Michelle, you might have a word there to share with us.
Yeah, just briefly, Marty's wife, Pat, and I we were talking earlier today. She said that he had an infection brewing for weeks before, and last Monday went into the hospital, and they finally did find a bacteria. They were able to treat it with a specific antibiotic, so he's making small improvement every day. A little setback with a secondary infection, and he should be going to skilled nursing, not life care. He's going to skilled nursing after he's done in the hospital, and he'll be with us when he can get back to being with us.
Thanks, Michelle. And we are thinking of Marty and wishing him the best to get back on his feet. First, I'll announce or introduce everyone else here in our front of the meeting room, but we are, this is a live stream YouTube meeting, so that it will be also recorded for anyone listening on YouTube, welcome as well. And welcome to our residents and other citizens who may be in attendance. In the house tonight, we have Mark Miller, who's Director of our Public Works. Kristen Camp is our Township Solicitor. She'll be handling a public hearing this evening. Chris Boylan is one of our primary senior accountants within our finance department. Dave Ware is our Director of Finance. And Kara is going to be our court reporter for the public meeting hearing tonight. Last but absolutely not least is Derek Davis, our newly appointed Township Manager and at the helm. So welcome, everyone. As it's written here in the Chairman's report, we're always looking at, it appears, for what we refer to as ABCs, Authority, Board, or Commission volunteers to serve in open positions. There is, of course, a lot of activity always in January when we reorganize for reappointments. But throughout the course of the year, there are appointees that, for various reasons, step off of their respective commissions or boards. So keep an eye on those, and if you have an interest, make inquiries either through the website and directly to the township staff, Derek, and the other members of the township staff. A very good program that make you aware of the 2021 Neighborhood University. They will be in-person sessions. Neighborhood University is a program that has been established through the Westchester Area Council of Governments, of which East Goshen Township is a member, with 6 other municipalities: the borough of Westchester, West Goshen, Thornbury, West Whiteland, East Bradford Township, Westtown, and probably missing one, but the group of governments that come together, and this is one of the very fine programs that they put together. This year's 2021 Neighborhood University will take place starting in September and go through November, and there's a series of 6 or 7 sessions that citizens can participate in that is a mini course in municipal government and all of the various functions, the breadth of activities from police services to municipal finance to stormwater, planning and zoning, and the overall history and authority within municipal government. So it's a very good program. We usually have 40 to 50 resident citizens who participate in the classes. And you know, there's 6 or 7 of them. You may not be able to make all of them, but if you sign up for any number of them that you can attend, I think you will enjoy them and benefit from the offerings. They're put on by professional staff from the various member municipalities. So there's a link here. You can tune into it and learn a little bit more about it. Public hearings. I think at this point in time, I want to turn this over to Kristen Camp, our township solicitor. This is an ordinance that falls both within our subdivision land development as well as our zoning chapter that has to do with pipeline awareness. And it's been an ordinance that has been in the works with the Planning Commission and the Pipeline Task Force for some number of months. And we've got to the point where we've advertised, and here we are for a public hearing. So Kristen, I'll turn it over to you. And
Thank you. So your Planning Commission worked on this through, I guess in 2019, they were tasked with looking at various ordinances to address pipelines throughout the township. And the ordinance before you today proposes to amend your subdivision land development ordinance, which is chapter 205 of the East Goshen Code. It also has minimal changes to chapter 240, which is the township zoning ordinance. Both of those ordinances are governed by the state law. It's called the Municipalities Planning Code, and that code requires that certain procedures take place before the board can adopt amendments to either of those 2 ordinances. So I'd just like the minutes to reflect, and that's why we have Carrie here, the various procedural requirements that we went through before the board could adopt this ordinance tonight. So the first is we had to advertise tonight's hearing. We advertised it in the daily local news on July 5th and July 12th, 2021. I have as a first exhibit the proof of publication of that advertisement. The second thing we need to do, because we only do a summary ad in the paper, we have to make a full copy of the ordinance available for public inspection. So it's at the Chester County Law Library as well as the daily local news. So I sent an email on June 3rd attaching a certified copy of the ordinance in case anybody wanted to inspect it. The third exhibit, B3, is a very detailed memorandum from Ernest Harkness, the chairman of the Planning Commission. It is dated March 8th, 2021, and it explains the process that the Planning Commission went through, their cooperation with the task force, pipeline task force, the different types of ordinances that they considered, and then the rationale for why they ultimately landed on the particular ordinance that's before you. Because it's a zoning and subdivision ordinance, the Planning Commission has to review it and give a recommendation to the board. So this correspondence I've marked as Board Exhibit 3, that is in fact the Planning Commission's recommendation that they made at their February 3rd, 2021 meeting. They unanimously passed the motion to recommend that the board adopt this particular ordinance that's before you. And the last exhibit is Board 4, which is correspondence from the Chester County Planning Commission. It is addressed to Mr. Rick Smith, dated April 21st, 2021. And there are various comments, and I believe that staff and myself have looked at some of those comments. Some of them suggest some different ordinances that the Planning Commission did in fact already review and consider. So I think a lot of their comments have already been addressed or taken care of throughout the process that the Planning Commission went through. So the ordinance is fairly straightforward. It amends the saldo to add definitions for hazardous liquid pipeline and natural gas transmission pipeline. It requires, as part of any subdivision and land development application, it has a particular section, 205-40.1, and that would require what's called a pipeline awareness study. So if somebody was proposing to do a subdivision or a land development, or they're proposing to build a planned residential development, or they're asking for conditional use, which is actually a zoning approval for various uses that are spelled out in the ordinance, the applicant would have to submit a pipeline awareness study. It has to be prepared by a professional engineer, and it has to examine, well, first of all, if those applications that I mentioned are within 660 feet of the center line of a pipeline, then this study becomes applicable. And the applicant has to hire an engineer, which they typically would have an engineer already helping them with the planning process. And that engineer would have to evaluate the impact of the proposed development and how the pipeline could potentially impact things within the development. The reason why the Planning Commission thought this was a helpful and useful tool was that at the early stages of these developments, the applicant is obviously put on notice that there's these pipelines within 660 feet, and that they can take into account what the impacts would be from that type of a pipeline. They would examine what's the material going through the pipeline, if there are certain mitigation measures that they can take when putting their plan together. Then basically the point of having this study be submitted to the board and to the Planning Commission is that those protective measures be taken early on in the process. Those pipeline studies would be submitted to your consultants, as all the materials are when subdivision and conditional use applications are filed. So your consultants will have an opportunity to, opine upon whether additional mitigation measures should be recommended or implemented into the plan. So with a conditional use application, obviously that's something the board could impose as conditions, that certain additional measures be taken. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have on the ordinance, but as I said, it's been somewhat of a long process. I think the Planning Commission and the task force should be commended on their efforts in really trying to get something that they feel balances the interest of protecting future developments, future inhabitants of developments, but also recognizing the township is pretty much built out and that there are a lot of pipelines that cross the boundaries of the township. So I think it's sort of balancing those interests.
Thank you, Kristen. A lot of deliberation and exchanges occurred between the Planning Commission and the Pipeline Task Force, who were very vested in this particular ordinance. And from my standpoint, I think it's a good start. It certainly could be amended in the future. We have not had that much development in the township nor do we have anything particularly in the so-called pipeline for development, so that to see how this plays out for the first development that may occur, and we will see how that process works, the value of the assessment, the study that's done, and the interplay with our advisory boards and commissions on reviewing it and seeing what kind of mitigating elements could play out given the nature of whatever the development is. So I think it's a good start from my standpoint. Michelle, John, would you have comments on this before I would open it up to any public comments?
There we go. I don't have any comments or questions except to say that I really do appreciate all the work that both Planning Commission and the Pipeline Task Force did on this. It really is, I think, it's a novel approach to pipeline issues.
I agree. In fact, I appreciate the work that was done by the Pipeline, the Planning Commissions, even more than Michelle does.
And I'm not certain of this, but Derek or Kristen, I would venture that we may be the first municipality in Chester County that's adopted such an ordinance at this point in time. So we've tried to get as proactive as we can, even though the pipelines are in, but we're trying to be responsive with the main objective going forward is safety. That's the best we think we can do going forward as a community, as the governing body, as the township, so that this is one of those elements.
I think we're gonna see a lot of other townships adopting this very resolution.
Yeah, I would think that they
Ordinance,
will
excuse
take, this ordinance. I think that there will be some others that will pick up on it, particularly some that have been impacted even more than East Goshen, if you will, the West Whitelands and the West Goshens, for example. How about any questions or comments from members of the public who are here tonight? Yes, Christina, please come up, introduce yourself, and
Good evening, my name is Christina Morley. I am a resident. I can announce my address if you'd like. 1530 Allison Drive. That is the Marydale Pinoaks development. I am a member of the Pipeline Task Force. I would also like to acknowledge the time and effort that was put in to developing this ordinance. It did take a long time, as Kristen noted. However, I would like to encourage the board to separate the time and the effort that goes into completing these documents from the document itself and the content. I think that documents, as we go forward into the future, should be able to stand on their own and should not be evaluated as a factor should not be used as to the time that it took to complete them. I think it should be acknowledged, but not used as a measure or a metric as to how good the document is itself. The reason why I say that is because I've noticed that over time, we put forth documents to the board, but then events happen that affect them and give good reason why they should be changed or amended or updated. But often we go back and say, but it took so much time and so many people worked on it. That's why it's a good document. And so I think that this is a good example of that. It did take a long time and a lot of people worked on it. But also recently there were very important developments that came out of significant entities here in the county and the Commonwealth, which have kind of changed the direction. And they are now aligning along two very important concepts. One of those is that we cannot, and I'm going to read an excerpt from Judge Barnes's ruling. The three entities that I'm talking about are Judge Barnes's ruling, the PUC's recent proposed rules, which have been updated, and also the county has now published draft hazard mitigation plan, which is updated from their 2015 plan. So in Judge Barnes's ruling, it says that there cannot be a one-size-fits-all public awareness program. That there are some areas that have low populations, there are some areas that have high populations, and also what we have to look at, she notices that Sunoco itself has taken actions that have led to a inconsistent and confusing environment for stakeholders. They have sent awareness notices to the affected public, to excavators and public officials, and to emergency responders using different buffer distances. She says that in 2016 to 2018, Sunoco was utilizing a buffer distance of 1320 feet, which equals a quarter of a mile, on either side of their ME1 pipeline. But then a merger occurred between a number of entities, Sunoco Pipeline, Energy Transfer Equity, Energy Transfer Partners, and then they reverted back to a distance of 660 feet. After that, PHMSA sent them a letter and said, you are erroneously using 660 feet. That seems to be based on your non-HVL service, when you were just transporting petroleum products, not HVL products. So then Sunoco goes back and they go a distance beyond 2,800 feet, but that distance is redacted. And the reason why 2,800 feet is mentioned here is because that's what Andover Homeowners Association asked for in the PUC Safety 7 case. And Judge Barnes ultimately says, well, it's a moot point because they're going way beyond that, but we don't know what it is because that was blocked out. After that, as you probably know, the PUC just released their updated proposed rules. And one of the most significant things is that they've recognized that gas lines cannot be treated the same as HVL lines. And so they've now divided those and they're issuing separate rules for HVL lines. This was the primary point of departure between the Pipeline Task Force and the Planning Commission, was that we were urging for a greater distance to be listed for the HVL lines. That's the biggest beast that's coming through the Pipeline Task Force, and they chose instead to just settle on 660 feet for any pipeline within the township. We felt that that was not accurate and that was not adequate. Throughout the PUC document, they have listed actions which will now be taken, and I can go through them, but basically it says for a school building or any facility which is located within 1,000 feet of a pipeline or a pipeline facility of a hazardous liquid pipeline utility shall maintain upon request, and then they list all these things that they have to provide that entity. They have to furnish records, they have to have liaison activities, they have to have meetings, but the distance that they use is 1,000 feet. When you look at the county's updated hazard mitigation plan, they also, in their newly updated document, they include a new section just for hazardous liquid pipelines. They are also recognizing that these are two different entities. They cannot be treated the same. It is an eye-opening report. I just gave a presentation at our last Pipeline Task Force meeting about it. The reason why this is important for our township in particular is because the county itself has done a hazard risk assessment and a probability assessment. We have been told, it has been suggested in this room at our Pipeline Task Force meetings, that the situation that we are facing is a high consequence, but a low risk situation. The document coming out of the county clearly shows that it is a high risk, high probability situation that we are facing. They have attributed, it is in writing, a greater than 90% annual probability for an HVL accident or incident, if you want to use that word, in the county. And then they drill down township by township, and they tell you whether that probability is higher, equal to, or lesser than the county. And for East Goshen, it is higher. The reason why that is important is because then they make recommendations for how to mitigate this risk, how to lower the impact, how to lessen the damage. And one of their recommendations is to adopt the model setback and buffer ordinance that is offered through the county. That was the initial recommendation from the task force to this board. They are like two puzzle pieces that go together. The risk assessment and the way to reduce the risk. It's the model ordinance. And the comments that we received back when we sent them this awareness ordinance was, why aren't you using the model ordinance? Why aren't you using 1,000 feet? So we're kind of come full circle. I acknowledge the work on it, but I think that the more that we align ourselves with these entities, the county, the PUC, Judge Barnes, the better off we are, instead of having a piece that kind of fits that we made ourselves. I am going to graciously disagree and say, I don't think we're going to see other townships adopt this awareness ordinance. I think we should get in line with the other townships who have adopted the model ordinance that was put out by the county. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Other public comments, please? And you know, I've forgotten, Russ, before you, Russ.
Yeah.
Yes, before, I know David's on the line, and I forgot about David asking, you know, so, David, are you there?
I am.
Okay, just so I kind of forgot about you there as far as your comment, but, you're standing by, so you can tune in, but, Russ Frank?
Russ Frank, 451 Gateswood Drive. I have two simple questions. One is, today I received an email, maybe it was last night, from Mark Miller about this announcement that they put in the daily local news today. That's the first time I think I ever saw one of them in this township. And I requested, why don't we do constant contact for the announcements? Never got an answer. But Mark did one today, and I thought that was tremendous.
I have to plead ignorance on that one.
Yeah, for the trash removal.
Actually,
Right.
The bid notice.
Yeah, but I think this type of thing should be put out there in constant contact. Maybe I didn't see it, but I'm trying to read them all. So that's the very simple question.
Yeah, I don't know if we historically have done constant contact for ordinances, so I'll look into that. Certainly something that constant contact can be utilized for.
Yeah, I know they have.
Good comment,
The second one is, with this ordinance that you're trying to process, is that going to kill the TNT project?
I don't think it has a.
Because the buildings that are going to be put up there are going to be close to these pipelines, right?
Yeah, now, the nature of the ordinance,
Russ, the nature of the ordinance, as I understand it, and Kristen and others stand by if I'm erroneous, but this ordinance is not necessarily if a pipeline awareness study is completed and there are indications for mitigation, it's possible that if the applicant does not want to cooperate with those mitigating recommendations, that it could put up a matter before the governing body as to whether the application should be approved or the development should be approved. There's not really any case law on upholding an ordinance like this in the face of development. We know, for instance, that traffic impacts, no matter how serious they seem to the community at the time, have rarely, if ever, created case law where they've been able to negate a development application. So this is new territory, but the matter that comes out of it is more of an assessment, recommendations, and then the review by the township to say these things need to be considered, and they're built in. And if the developer says we will do them, developer who entity or individual says we will do them or we will not, that may trigger a response in the township that potentially could reject the subdivision or the application based upon that. So it's not, David, yeah.
I think it's important to be clear that it's not a 660-foot buffer that you can't build anything in. It's if you are within 660 feet of a center line of a pipeline, you have to have a study, and it's called a pipeline awareness ordinance for reasons. It doesn't prohibit building within that buffer.
Very good point. Yes.
It's an awareness. You need to know it's there, and then we can have a dialogue with the supervisors and as to how that might impact the design of the building, the structure of the building, ingress, egress, and that type of thing. So it doesn't prohibit construction within that buffer.
Yeah, David, that's a very good point. And the pipeline awareness that's an operative term. So that if you're within that 660, it's not going to negate development per se, but it could throw a wrench into the development approval process, depending on the receptivity to mitigating indicators for the study that the township would say that we want these, whether it has to do with, as David says, ingress or location of accesses, ingress, egress for traffic, as well as the actual occupants of the structure. So it's not a slam dunk, no, you're in the 660 area. That was a big question that was looked at early on in this ordinance about going beyond awareness, but simply saying if you're within this buffer or what the larger dimensions have to do with blast zones that you just can't develop. That's a big problematic issue, and there probably would have been a lot of suit against the township should something like that occur for a taking without compensation. So that was an early discussion, but this one sets up a dialogue and potentially mitigating constructs for the application. So it's not, as David said, it's not to negate
Mike, just by way of an example of somebody, brought in a subdivision land development, and it would say, 20 acres, and they were gonna put 20 houses on it, and we said, well, we need to have 10 acres of open space, and it was within 660 feet, then we might want to have a dialogue with the developer to say, why don't you put the open space on the pipeline side so it's not inhabited? And just to be able to have those kind of discussions.
Mm-hmm. That's a good example.
But to be clear, we're not discussing T&D at all. That's not.
I know, I'm
part
not
of this.
discussing it, but I just wanted that it's out there on your horizon
Yeah.
somewhere.
But
I just wanted to find out,
that's a
if it's
question.
going to impact that.
I don't know that it will, because T&D is really something that it's been somewhat, if you will, dissolved in that formal sense. We've had, since we've been in this COVID period, we had agreed as a board that subjects, particularly if possible, that were of great concern to the residents, and the T&D was one that occurred, that we were going to try and avoid bringing those up while we were in that remote Zoom environment, if you will. But we also had conversations and at meetings at times during the period to say T&D may be not the best term to use to look at this so-called corridor between 352 and Boot Road as a town center or a traditional neighborhood development, but maybe improving the aesthetics of what can go in there in the future through simply doing subdivision and land development guidelines and design standards that could better improve the aesthetics without putting this label on it that created a lot of angst, I think, for people that maybe didn't understand it or felt that it was going to create a development environment that was not apropos to East Goshen Township. But I don't see that there's going to be any particular impact from this on that, but there could be an individual dialogue depending on what's proposed. Russ said that there's no doubt about that relative to this ordinance.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Russ.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Kristen, am I right in assuming that if further data comes to us about the distance, 660 feet or whatever it is, we have the right to amend the ordinance?
Absolutely.
Do we have to do that in a hearing, or can it be done by resolution?
It has to be done through the same process you followed here.
Fresh amendment, fresh public hearing process.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
Christina, where is Christina? There you are. I appreciate the comments. As I said in the beginning before your comments, this is a first step. And depending on how things fall out with Judge Barnes and any appeals there, the PUC rules, it's interesting the separation there that they've done. The county has come out. I know that the county model ordinance was discussed. But I believe that the pipeline task force is going to continue to work on these things, and we'll see how it evolves. And again, good comment about data that comes forward, and you'll bring it to our attention, and you'll have dialogue with the Planning Commission. But this is a first step, so we'll see how we go. So I appreciate it, and accept some admonishment, but also appreciate the information as well. Thank you.
I'm just going to make a comment that I agree with Christina that this is more of a living document and it can be changed at any point. And I think that this is a good step to start. I think that we need to have other information come to us, and then we can potentially maybe amend this moving forward. I think that it's an ever-changing environment that we're living in, particularly with these pipelines and all the information that we're getting on a regular basis. So.
Thanks, Michelle. At this point, any further public comment? David, anything further from you, from your standpoint there up in Connecticut?
I'm good.
Okay. At this point, Kristen, I think we would call for a motion. Is there a motion to consider this ordinance tonight?
Yes, I'll make the motion that we adopt the ordinance amending the East Goshen Township Code, Chapter 205, titled Subdivision and Land Development, Section 205-7, titled Definitions, to add a definition for hazardous liquid pipeline and natural gas transmission pipeline, to add a new section 205-40.1 titled Pipeline Awareness Study, amending Chapter 240 of the East Goshen Township Code titled Zoning, Section 240-31.b, parentheses 3, and parentheses 4, 7, to require a pipeline awareness study to be submitted as part of certain conditional use applications.
I second the motion.
All right, a motion and second. Any further comment? Hearing none, I'll call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. And hearing no negatives, 4-0. The ordinance is adopted. And you'll place a number with that one, Derek. Ordinance 2021 dash. Okay. All right, very good.
Derek, I have a copy I can hand you. So, I think that's all you're moving for.
Yep, I was just gonna say, Kristen, thank you. You're on your way to West Goshen. All right, we'll have a good meeting there. Thanks very much for your
Thanks,
services.
Thanks for
Derek,
coming
thanks
here
very much.
first.
Appreciate it. Okay, folks, emergency services reports, I didn't see the chief, but there's the chief. So chief, come on down, come on up, say hello.
Good evening,
Chief Brandon
everyone.
Burnett, Vigo, Westtown East Goshen Regional Police Department. Good to see you, chief. And we did receive, I don't know about everybody else, we did receive the postcard on fraud.
Oh, yeah.
Very good.
Yes.
Before I get into my report, I'd like to remind everyone that if you'd like more information than I present tonight, please visit our website at wegopd.org. Information on arrests, current investigations being conducted, police blotters, and community engagement events. So,
Chief, I don't know if the microphone is on or if it just needs to be up a little bit for your, oh, it's on.
it's on. Yes, I'm just too tall.
There you go.
Okay, start with a little statistical presentation. For the last 30 days, there were 931 calls for service that the department responded to. With regard to East Goshen, 450 of them were for East Goshen. A summary of the last 6 weeks in East Goshen: 23 fraud investigations, 4 sex investigations, 2 physical assaults, 24 disturbances, disputes, harassments, etc., 12 thefts from vehicles, 5 other thefts, 6 reports of criminal mischief, 3 missing person reports, 2 children, 1 adult, all of them have been located. 1 individual was arrested for being in possession of a stolen vehicle, and we had 1 bomb threat in which 2 individuals were charged for it. Obviously, that is a very busy 6 weeks in East Goshen. With regard to the statistics, what we're finding is that all of the townships, we are at a higher level of calls for service than we were during the peak of the pandemic, but we are just slightly lower than what we were in 2019. What causes us concern as a police department is that the levels of violence associated with all of our calls has escalated. Regardless of whether it's a neighbor dispute, a road rage incident, or anything else, it has gone up significantly. We're continuing to monitor that. And the other thing that causes us concern is that there's a significant increase in the mental health aspect of almost all of our calls. And I point that out because if you or someone you love is having a mental health issue, you are not alone. And I want to remind you that the police department serves as a resource to you for information about how to access the system, what resources are available in the county, and we encourage you because we've gotten very positive feedback from our residents about the very low level of force that we've used to help people get the treatment that they need. In the last 7 months, we have literally pulled somebody in a window where they were trying to jump. We had an individual who was trying to run onto a major highway, and we had another individual who was cutting themselves with a knife. We were able to get them under control, get them transported, and get them the help that they need. So please remember that we are a resource. And as the board has indicated, I indicated that there were 23 frauds. This mailer went out per capita to the townships, and it talks about, number one, how to prevent yourself from being the victim of a fraud, and also how to protect yourself from various thefts, which also was a big item in the last 6 weeks. If you don't use it, please pass it on to someone who can use it, and we will be obtaining a rather significant number of these. If we go to community events, or you have a homeowners association meeting, or anything else, we would be more than willing to bring these and hand them out in case somebody has misplaced those. But the bottom line is smart people are the victims of fraud. These individuals are very good at what they do. So if you are the victim of fraud, please do not feel that that's a reflection on you. Please report it to us. If we can help you recover some of the money that you've lost, we will. Any questions from the board?
Chief, I have none. It's interesting on the nature of fraud. Just this week, our board emails, we had a fraudulent email that came to us. It was listed under from David Shuey, but when you looked at it, and if you quickly looked at the name, you'd say, "Oh, okay, I'll respond. Please, can you get in touch with me? I need to talk to you," or whatever the content was. But then when you looked at the email address, it clearly was nothing to do with David Shuey. And so paying attention at any time, and it's so easy to just jump and click. And next thing you know, you've hit a link, and a lot of bad things can happen. So it happened to us this week. Unfortunately, we didn't get clobbered, but it just goes to show how pervasive it is.
And I consider myself a very safe individual. I use a company, LifeLock, to protect myself.
Yeah.
And roughly 3 weeks ago, somebody applied using my name, date of birth, and social security number for unemployment benefits. You're doing that in the chief's name? Wow. That's
That's bold. That is bold.
So if you're the victim, no matter what you do to try to protect yourself, sometimes
We're all susceptible. We are all
Exactly.
susceptible. Hopefully, we're not vulnerable, though, with information like that.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief,
Thank you.
very much. Stay safe.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Next item we have are the emergency services reports. And before Derek is going to provide those tonight, before I provide those, I just want to share with you a mailing that you may have received by now from the Friends of Goshen Fire Company that reads like this: "Yes, the fair is back." Great thing. That's a community event. As I often refer to some of these kind of events, great Americana in our community. It's a very important fundraiser for Goshen Fire Company. We have career firefighters now. It's not all volunteer. The cost of firefighting and the services and the operations goes up every year. The demands increase. Very important fundraiser. So here's an opportunity to contribute to the fair. Maybe you're going to win something with this because it has to do with some chances that are in here. But if you've received it, take a look at it, and maybe you want to take a chance to win something, but you'll be contributing to the Goshen Fire Company. Derek?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. For Goshen Fire Company for the month of June 2021, there were 20 fire calls, 6 fire police, 135 EMS, with a total of 161 calls for the month.
Derek, do we have any explanation why ours are down, which is pleasant, and why West Goshen's are so far up?
I do not. I can check, and I was actually going to say if there's any more specific questions about the numbers, we should probably check back with Carmen when he's back from vacation, but I do not have any explanation on that as of right
interesting when you look at the monthly updates under the major incidents of building fires. 4 of them were in West 4 of the 6 major incidents, 4 of them were building fires or gas leaks in West Goshen. There was 1 hazmat in Westtown, and then there was a response into Newtown Township over Bryn Mawr Avenue as the major events. But the fact that it's down marginally, but the differential there, it'd be interesting to know if there's something particular, but these kind of month-to-month statistics do ebb and flow, and there's and until you get into the depth of the total incidents, there could be some that are soft calls where there may not have been equipment dispatched, et cetera, more of those than the major incidents. So, but it's it's interesting to know, and that's why we'd ask at least to have a year-to-date prior year, so we can at least have some comparative perspective, and that's been a bit helpful. Go ahead.
For Malvern Fire Company, for the month of June, there were 21 calls, 2 basic life service, there was 1 transport, 19 advanced life service, and then there was 13 transports stemming from that. And last but not least, we have Good Fellowship Ambulance, and that is 42 calls for East Goshen for the month of June, resulting in, that's 8% of the calls, total calls of Good Fellowship. So again, if there's any more specific questions regarding the emergency reports, I probably would get back to you when Carmen is back from vacation.
It looks like,
Jody, you wanted to come up and ask
Yes, I
something?
have a quick question for Derek, if he doesn't mind clarifying with Carmen.
Sure.
When I was looking through the documents, I noticed that there was some
You'll have to announce your name and address, please.
Cody Bright, 1331 Park Avenue.
Oh, that's the first time I think I've seen you, Cody.
I'm listening, guys, on YouTube, calling in. Just a quick question regarding the automatic alarms, which I noticed was a really high amount in the fees associated with it. Just maybe a little clarification on the notification process, if those fees ever get paid from the people who have gone over their limit of the automatic alarms. And then also the last question with it would be, is the fee high enough to cover the amount of time that the police and the fire force go out?
So the false, you're talking about the false alarms, right? Yeah, so I haven't been here enough to give a history of the payment percentages of how much people actually pay them. I do know I'm dealing with a couple right now. It's an incremental amount, so I don't quote me, but it starts off very small. So 1 and 2 might be $50. I know when you get up to your 8th and 9th, it's around $2,000 a pop.
I was just gonna say,
So it does increase substantially after you get to the 8th and 9th. To answer your last question, I can tell you right now, I've had numerous conversations with emergency responders, and the answer is no, it'll never cover. It's just something to keep people honest. It's not going to cover all the time, money, and resources dedicated to a call. If it's a false alarm and an entire truck has to go out. So
Sure. Just one quick follow-up question then.
Yep.
For the fees, they differ based off if it's a business or it's a residential?
I do not believe so.
I don't believe it's
No,
different.
it's just a straight
Okay.
false alarm.
And
actually,
It
we were just
depends
talking
whether
about
it
this.
depends whether it's fire or not.
I was just
That's
gonna
it,
say,
yes.
we did separate the two
Yes.
between fire calls and
Police calls.
Security alarm
Right.
calls.
That's correct.
We have broken those two out, I guess, a year
So
or two
instead
ago, we
of
separated.
$200, in the first and second are warnings, so there is no fine. And then after that, I believe security alarm is 200 and a fire is 500.
The fire, Cody, is more penal because the nature of the response for equipment and volunteers, and there's risk every time those volunteers and the career firefighters and the response suit up and move out. There's a risk of injury for them every single time, whether it's traffic or whether it's just getting on the equipment. So there is that's why there's a difference in that kind of response from regular security.
But I can get back to you on some of the historical.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I did, Michelle talked to me earlier
Yeah, we were talking
today.
about it today.
Kelly was at the bank, but I'm following up with her. There's some repeat offenders. Typically, they're in Wellington and Bellevue,
I think
so,
13 the last.
yeah.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
kind of goes back to an
And Mark Gordon, our
Facilities.
codes enforcement officer is not here, but,
She is.
He's hiding in the back.
where are you?
He's hiding in the back behind
Well,
Tom.
speak up. What do you know back there, Mr. Gordon? Anything we should know about the alarms presently?
Yeah, so you guys are half close, very close.
Can you please fix that?
Sure, so, you're right about the security and fire alarms are separated. First and second alarms are free. You get an initial, so you buy your house, you have a false alarm, you get an initial that says, we have an ordinance. It requires you to maintain your system and keep it in good working order, understand how to use it. First false, second false are free in a rolling 12-month period. Third one in a rolling 12-month period is a $100 fee.
Security.
For security.
And we have 100% payment. 100%. I've taken them to court and they pay. I had a gal walk in here the other day, she owed $2,600. Well, paid it because we were going to court. It was done. I mean, we had all the documentation. We'd given her all the warnings. It was what it was. It's gonna materialize at court. So, yes, it takes time with those. That was probably over a 6-year period, but she was going through divorce. She had hip surgery, there's all, everyone has a story, right? So, the other part of your question was, does it cover? No, this is a deterrent ordinance like Derek mentioned. And we're trying to lower the number of calls. Our calls were in the 700 per year or something that were false at one point. And the fire company was like, please help us. So we said, yeah, you're right. We have to do something. And if we're lower than West Goshen, good. I think our ordinance is doing something. I think it's realizing people, look, our teenagers need to know how to use the system, right? They need to know how to put in the code. And hey, if you're just letting the dog out or you're home playing shooting baskets, you don't need to set the alarm. Because you're just gonna set it off when you walk back in. So I think people are understanding. It's your responsibility to maintain and understand how to use it. So it's working. Yes, it's it's a little labor intensive, but I think it's worth it. So
We may get some more stats on that as we get more history now that we've particularly broken out the two and we see, what the, we're not looking at it as a revenue source. Again, we're looking at it as a safety measure, both for the responders as well as the occupants who have the system.
I think it was 17 or 18, we probably rolled that back and said, wait a minute, we need to separate the fire. And because we were having the big ones like the commercial establishments, giant supermarket, notorious, Wellington, notorious. It's just nature of the beast, big buildings, lots of circumstances. But they have to know how to use the system, they know how to maintain it, and the fire service guys need to know how to set up the alarm system so that you put a heat detector, don't put a heat detector next to the rotisserie oven. Okay? It's gonna go off a lot because it gets greasy and so we have those conversations and we get there. But yes, so they're much more expensive because we're rolling $1 million fire apparatus versus $100,000 cruiser. It's a big difference. So.
Mark, thank you. Thanks for the additional. I'm glad to know you're here. I'm sorry I didn't recognize you earlier.
Incognito.
It was. Next item, folks, is our financial report for July 16th. And Dave, should I turn that over to you, sir?
Certainly. As of June 30th, the net of pass-throughs, our general fund had revenues of $6,589,918, and expenses of $4,721,132. It's a positive variance of $1,868,786. Year-to-date positive variance versus our budget year-to-date positive variance is $1,043,299. As of June 30th, the general fund balance was $7,567,719. On the expense side, it's primarily timing differences between the months that actually expenses came in versus budgeted account. Parks and recreation expenses year-to-date are lower due to a combination of lower equipment and maintenance repair, Bowtree Pond work that's been delayed, community day expenses timing, Marydale Pond plantings that were pushed back to fall, and that was pretty much it for Parks and Rec. The full year police expenses and revenues should be in line as far as net goes with the adopted budget. And then the timing of the Goshen Fire Company contribution was budgeted in June and actually came out in July. So that's $349,000 of our emergency services expense year-to-date variance. On the revenue side, we're outperforming budget again as of half the year being completed. Earned income tax revenue is up 8% versus budget. It looks like we're collecting roughly 6% of that increase is coming from 2020 taxes. Real estate transfer tax has exceeded year-to-date expectations by about 40% due to unbudgeted commercial and residential property transfers. A number of properties transferred over $1 million each. The codes revenues are up over 50% versus budget as there's an unbelievable number of increased building permits versus the budget, which Mark can attest to as well. I won't read all the fund balances.
Dave, thanks. And I think your comments on the revenue is a reflection of, in a micro sense, of the broader economy. And the reference to the earned income tax, if you net out that 2020 tax, which is coming through now at the 6%, 2% is about as robust increase in earned income taxes as a mature municipality like East Goshen is going to have annually, I think. So if it continues at 2% increase in earned income tax for these years ahead, that's a pretty positive thing because a lot of municipalities in this area have really started to flatten out in the 1% range. So, and then the other one related to codes revenues, there's been pent-up demand, and the real estate transfer tax. Of course, there are more transactions going on now. It's a robust market, particularly residential, as you noted, with some high-end property sale. So that's good stuff. Thank you. We have minutes and the treasurer's report. The minutes of July 6th. There are any comments on any revisions, corrections to the minutes? I would hear them now. I have none myself to offer.
I have no corrections.
None? Okay. Are there any public comments on the minutes? Anyone have any comment?
Mr. Vice Chair, I would move to adopt the draft minutes dated July 6th, 2021, as they are.
Okay, second?
Second motion.
Yep, good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye, too. Aye. Thank you, Dave. David? Oh, sorry. Whoa. It was a slip. Yeah. It was a slip. It must have been technology. It wasn't me. I didn't do that. In case you didn't know it, it's always David Shuey. And that is always Dave Ware. Notice the distinction. Let's see, our treasurer's report for July 15th. These are bills to pay that have been prepared by our Director of Finance and with the assistance of Chris Boylan. Any questions on the particular bills to pay that are in front of us from the expenditures register from any of the various funds? John, Michelle?
I have a couple questions. So batch 2 of 5, Dave, it's page 2. And this is the Brandywine Valley SPCA.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This cost us a lot of money.
Yep.
And I know that it's nice to pick up the 4 stray cats that were picked up and turned into the SPCA, but that cost us $735,
Yeah.
and we're not going to get none of that money back. So, what is going on in other townships? Do we have any other townships that have a similar contract or don't have a similar contract? What do they do with their strays?
Let Derek respond to that, because Derek, you know the breadth of the municipal participation throughout the county. And when I was at East Bradford, I had that issue all the time. And
they still haven't adopted the ordinance that we've adopted here, which says when we know that the party has been identified and they've
Right.
claimed their animal, then we can send them an invoice for the services.
Right.
But you don't always get that on the reports. But Derek, go ahead.
Yeah, Dave can respond to some of the
Oh,
financial
okay, sorry,
aspects, but no, so I was involved in a former job. There was basically a consortium that we did, and to answer Michelle's question, there's many municipalities in Chester County do the same thing because we all wrote the contract at the same time. I don't know how many years ago, it might have been 2015, 2016, I forget.
3-year contract.
But it was, and then it re-upped after that. But there's a couple of other options in Chester County that are fee-for-service type of catching stray animals and trying to get the owner or whatnot. But it turned out not to be as financially beneficial as the SPCA deal. So again, I don't have the numbers right in front of me about the specifics of what we pay. Obviously, Dave has a little bit more insight on that for per animal, but it stems from a contract that we had in 2015, and I believe we re-upped for at least one time. But to answer your question further, we will, like everything else, you go out for a contract and it will be up again, and we can reevaluate at any time after the contract. But I can tell you, it's not there's not a good solution.
Right, right.
There's a couple of bad ones. So.
And we really have an obligation to provide that service.
Well, yeah, we do,
which
but,
is tough.
but
Yeah.
I'm questioning
Yeah, it
what's
was,
going on in other townships, and we talked about this, and I wanted to get
I
your
thought,
input.
because I had spoken with Mark Gordon before, I thought that Willistown didn't have a contract, but they do. I called him today.
Mhm.
Talked to Marty, it was a great conversation. But they actually do, and he said, we just suck it up and it doesn't
Well, you know,
cost us
and I've heard
that
that from
much.
so many municipalities.
It's
yeah.
almost the exact same amount that we're at $11,000-12,000 a year. It's like annually.
And the only thing that we ask, I think, relative to the ordinance is that you make sure you check the individual animal reports that come in with them and make sure we're invoicing, if we know who the party is, that they pay for those services. When someone's animal gets out and they come to claim it, there's an identifier there, and they should be paying for those services. They got their animal back, great. They got great service, but that should be on them. So
Since that was passed, I don't think we've had one returned to owner.
yeah, there are very few actually that you'll see it usually circled. Return to resident, and then you get some ID. Yeah, it's
Disappointing.
Yeah,
So
I'm
that's,
with
it
you.
is what it is.
I'm with you.
All right, so another question real quick, Dave, batch 205, page 7. It's the vendor number 4207, last one on the page, Young Rembrandts. Is this art instruction for, summer camp? Batch 205, page 7.
I want to say
Yes,
yes.
that's a Jason.
Young-
Jason's
Young
not here
Rembrandts.
tonight, is he?
No, Young Rembrandts is part of that.
Is that part of
Part of the program.
their program? That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. I think those are all the questions I had.
John, any particular questions you have?
No, I'm good. In fact, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we graciously accept the receipts and approve the expenditures as presented in the expenditure register and as summarized in the treasurer's report.
And is there a second on that?
Second.
All right, any other comments? I'll call the question then, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, David. All right, move on. All right. Old business, any old business? Old business, no show business, all right. New business, consideration and recommendation from the Sustainability Advisory Committee, the SAC, to fully implement a township recycling toter program and to pursue a state grant that would cover 90% of the cost incurred for the recycling toters. Very briefly, we had here in the township a demonstration program that was initiated through the Sustainability Advisory Committee. And Christy Marshall is here today, who is our chair, that provided
covered toters for recyclables. We had an offering of 100 of them, and they went like a fire sale within a couple hours to see what the interest response was. There was clearly a lot of interest, and the response, we've got some statistics on how people have used them and what they've what their thoughts are about it. So at this point in time, the Sustainability Committee has identified a grant program through the state that with a match from the township, if the township applied for the grant, we would be awarded some $80-some thousand, and Christie will give the details to provide a full complement of toters, covered toters for recyclables throughout the township. The benefits of this has to do with containment of the recyclables, so environmentally, it's a good thing. It doesn't create litter beyond in the neighborhood or beyond. And it seemed like a sound program. But Christie, why don't you share with us any thoughts that you have, because you have a recommendation on this, and if you would, please.
Good evening, supervisors and East Goshen residents. I'm Christine Marshall-Suckle, 1576 Vassar Court. So I'm going to repeat a few things that Mike said and expand on a few others. So as he mentioned, you approved the pilot program this year, and they went in, the 100 totes that were offered went in 2 hours. So we would now like you to consider expanding further. Currently a state grant available that would cover 90% of the cost for us to purchase additional lidded totes for distribution. Tonight, we are only asking your approval for several East Goshen staff members to meet with an official representing the state regarding this grant application. The grant period expires in mid-September, and we are told there is no guarantee that this type of grant will again be available next year. After this meeting, we would then consider the terms explained to our staff, and if we are in agreement, our committee will return to you for additional approval to make the application in coordination with staff members. Before we return with that request, assuming we do, we will bring all relevant numbers for your consideration. We understand the cost of these totes may have increased recently. We will have specifics in hand before returning with our second request. We are assured none of the 10% required by our township will be required to be spent in 2021, but rather in 2022. This proposed increase of lidded totes will remain a voluntary program for all residents. Our current code, 194-6, Section A, actually reads, quote, "No person shall place recyclable materials in trash cans or trash bags for the collection of municipal waste," end quote. So recycling is already required of us as East Goshen residents, but the distribution of lidded bins will be made on a voluntary basis. And Mike, we're not suggesting we buy one for every additional resident. There will bring numbers, so it will be able to be supervised by you all. The availability of these totes, lidded totes, will enable residents to recycle cardboard and paper without them getting wet from rain or snow. When they are wet, they are considered trash and cannot be recycled at a financial loss to our township, as well as a loss, of course, from a sustainability perspective. Lidded bins also enable residents to include single-use plastic bags and film, such as bread bags and baggies. This program will complement the program about to be implemented in our park of several containers for residents to deposit these single-use plastic bags and film, those who don't already have lidded bins that they've purchased on their own. So just a few quick facts to consider. Americans use 100 billion plastic bags a year, which require 12 million barrels of oil to manufacture. Americans use an average of 365 plastic bags per person per year. People in Denmark use an average of 4 plastic bags per year. Only 1 to 3% of plastic bags in this country are ever recycled. The average American family brings home 60 plastic bags for every 4 trips to the grocery store. It takes 1,000 years for a plastic bag to degrade in a landfill. Unfortunately, the bags don't break down completely, but instead photodegrade, becoming microplastics that absorb toxins and contribute to polluting the environment. Chemical leachates from plastic bags impair the growth of the world's most important microorganisms. Prochlorococcus, a marine bacterium, provides 1/10 of the world's oxygen, and plastic bags are now impacting that. Birds often mistake shredded plastic bags for food, filling their stomachs with toxic debris. Fish eat thousands of tons of plastic a year, transferring it up the food chain to bigger fish and marine mammals. Microplastics are consumed by us through food and in the air. It is estimated that globally, people consume the equivalent of a credit card of plastic every week, and it's expected that by 2050, there will be more plastic than fish in the oceans. So our committee sees the collection of single-use plastic bags as an interim step at best. Our primary goal is the elimination of their use entirely. But as long as our residents continue to use single-use plastic bags to any degree, we want to make sure they don't blow away into the atmosphere or cause additional distress and injury to our wildlife and pets. So Tom and Brian have some additional points to make on behalf of our committee.
And as they come up, Christie,
You know, those big facts and bits of information are alarming. I think everybody's aware of the situation our planet is in relative to plastics. The one thing I want to ask then, so at this point in time, you would like the board to consider just the ability of the staff to meet with the state officials to talk about the application. Then you would come back to us later on with a recommendation to see if we would allow the application for the grant. If that were to occur, I think you stated it, but I want to make sure that were we to be awarded the grant and we're able to purchase 1,500 of these toters for distribution, it wouldn't be mandatory. It would be offered. We would work on it to say we would like you to have one. We'd be pleased, but we're not going to say you must have one. It would be voluntary, but we would be assisting them to have them delivered and somehow get a tally of who wants them and who doesn't, that sort of thing, but nothing mandatory.
People can register for them, but if they need help, some people don't have cars large enough, it all depends.
Sure.
Probably offer 2 sizes.
Sure.
But Tom
Go ahead.
and Brian have additional.
First of all, thanks, Mike, for giving most of my presentation. Appreciate it. Let me just add a couple more things that you might not have caught. We did do a survey following the pilot plant program, and we had excellent response from people that got the toters. 76% people responded, and it was a very, very positive response and a thank you, which is pretty unusual in a survey like this that we got that feedback. One of the interesting facts was that approximately 55% said that they had this positive response. I'm trying to find out here. Overall, we also asked them how much they increased their recycling, and on a numerical average, they said it was about 15%. So for the long run, I mean, if we roll this out across the community to people that want them, I think we'll see our recycling progress improve. And I had done some previous work that said we're basically at a plateau for the last 10 years as part of recycling. And we think just getting that out there, getting people a little bit more knowing that it's there and that we're paying attention to it, and that the township's willing to spend a little bit of money to make recycling a little bit easier for them is a positive thing. And one additional thing that we did, and I'll let Brian fill you out, is the Audio Committee, Subcommittee, we did some additional work on the how many totes we think we're going to need going forward. We each surveyed pretty substantial neighborhood kind of, so I'll let Brian talk about that.
And that's the number you came up with, 1,500. Is that
Yeah, we
correct?
actually came up with a number a little bit bigger.
It's
than that. We came up with
1,800. We'll see what the
1,800
cost
for the
is.
first year, and then I think potentially up to like 2,600. There's 3,400 residents. 6% have, well, no, more than that, 10 to 20% already have a significant, have a.
Yeah, I know we did as an example.
And so, I think we calculated and we rolled out this 100, and we figured out that probably potentially 2,600 people would be interested in participating in this program.
And note that the township invested about $7,000 for the demonstration for the 100 units. This would involve a match of about $9,000 for the township to apply for the grant, or at least commit to that kind of a contribution for $81,000 in the grant for it to be awarded. So that's an important distinction. Proportionality would be a good, I think, a positive thing.
It just depends on how much increase the totes might be, but we'll figure
Oh,
that
sure.
out after the initial.
Sure.
We're only asking for the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Christy. And by the way, if Tom, you didn't introduce yourself, Tom Kilburn is the chair of our Futures Committee. I'm not sure, did you say that, Tom? Well, you don't have to, I just said it.
Also a member of the Sustainability Advisory Committee, and my address is 312 Jefferson Drive.
Thank you, Tom. Ryan, go ahead and introduce
Hey,
yourself.
Mike, can I really quickly clarify some of the dates that are being mentioned?
Yeah.
I did call the office who's offering the 920 grant. It expires, submission expires September 24th of this year at 5 p.m. They expect by the end of the year to have an award. It would go out, all the documentation, April, and should be signed and returned June of next year. So that's kind of the timetable that they set.
Okay, that's good to know.
Hi, I'm Brian Hutchinson. I live at 1429 Cooper Circle. I've been with the Sustainability Advisory Committee for over a year now. I had the great distinction that I joined about 3 weeks before the shutdown. So I was able to participate with a couple of the live meetings, but I'm really grateful that we are now able to see each other face to face. I guess as the accountant in the group, I just wanted to bring a couple of facts to the survey that was performed. A great thanks goes out to Jason and staff for working with us closely, to helping to get all of that data available to us so I could do some data mining. Just a couple of points here. Out of the 110 people, we had, as Tom indicated, a very great response, 67 out of 110. I think if you've ever been in a business or an organization, you look to get maybe 1% or 3%.
Yeah.
To get 76 out of 110 is really a great, outstanding response.
Let me interrupt you with that then. You had 76 out of 110. What about the rest of them?
They just didn't respond.
They didn't respond.
No.
So you're not telling me that there was a bunch that didn't like the bins? Because we gave the bins away for free, didn't we?
Right, we gave the bins for free.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
There were some people who, just in terms of percentages here, 98.7% found that the wheeled cart was more convenient. 82% agreed there was less neighborhood litter on windy days. 93% agreed that it was nice having it in a closed container between pickup days. And I guess this is the one that really kind of gets me in terms of counting and diving into the numbers, is that there was a 14% average increase in the approximate amount of materials in the carts. Now, this is just a general comment from the people who were in this pilot program. However, I think that's pretty significant, because if you look at the difference between the cost, the tipping fee, which is, I have it here, from the township, from the finance department, from the works department, from Sue Smith, we gathered data, gathered information. Tom initially got this data for us, but I did a little bit more of the data mining. We currently pay $69 a ton to have the waste sent to the landfill. It's $20 a ton if it goes to total recycling. So there's a discrepancy, a difference of $49 a ton in savings. So this isn't a scientific study, but if 15% of our residents who participated in this study are indicating to us that they've increased the amount of recycling. The assumption here is that they're increasing it because they have a bigger toter and they're diverting it from the waste to the recycling bin. So obviously, this isn't science, this isn't a total science. I mean, it's just a small survey, but it is a data point. And if you use that data point and extrapolate based upon the tonnage, which was waste in 2020, which was 4,076 tons, even if you just take a look and consider that 10% of that waste might be diverted to recycling, that's 407 tons. If you take 407 tons and multiply it times the difference in those rates, at $49, that's $20,000 a year. So again, it's not, I'm not sitting here as a CPA and saying this is certified, accountants, but it is a data point. And so it's just something to consider. And again, as Christy was saying, we'd be more than happy to work with the staff.
Brian, thank you.
So what the Sustainability Committee is requesting us tonight is to consider whether or not just to authorize the committee to meet with the state representative with staff to discuss this as a pre-application. Members of the board, do you comment?
We need to vote on this?
I think we need to make a motion, so
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to allow township staff to schedule the pre-application meeting and identify the specific local funding match amount.
Second motion.
All right, any further comments?
Yep, I have one.
Russ, please.
First off, I'm big on recycling. When I first moved to this township, he gave us a little square bin. Still have it. I went out and bought 3 more cans, 32-gallon cans, and times during holiday seasons, I'll have 4 of those things out there.
Yeah.
Separated, which is a great plan. But the problem is with recycling, I think some of the numbers are maybe skewed on how much it costs to remove this stuff. I read an article a couple months ago, how much more it's going up in the next couple of years. Plants are closing, China's not taking it, it's costing us more to transport it. How do you guarantee that what we put in these bins actually gets recycled 100%? That's the problem, because a lot of stuff gets rejected.
I agree.
Can I respond?
Yeah, sure, Tom.
I think
That's a question many of us have. Does it really get recycled when we put it in those bins? We all have those questions. I mean, I've been to the facilities to see it, but I haven't seen the entire process. So we all have those
we've had discussions about this, amongst our committee. And Russ, you make an excellent point. My view is what's happened is China just shut us off.
Yeah.
Okay? So what's happened is we're gonna have to figure out, as a country, new uses for these recycled products. And a lot of them have a lot of value. Aluminum cans, no brainer. Polyester bottles, no brainer. That's being all used in other polyester recycled material. And a lot of those glass products that are a little bit hard to recycle right now, or paper, we're gonna come up. If there's an opportunity to get something that's free or, less than free, I'm convinced that we've got the companies out there that are innovators, are gonna come up with our own uses for those recycling. And we gotta take a long-term view on this. And let's not turn people off to recycling right now just because there's a little bit of a blip in the supply-demand situation. That's my view.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
I'm not saying that we get rid of the plan. I think it's a great plan. It's just that there was a lot of problems with the plan, and I think we need to educate our township residents about the plans. Because there's certain things that people.
Can I make a comment on that? One of the reasons that recycled materials get refused is that they arrive soaked from rain or some sort of outside contaminant. That's why the covered bins will increase the acceptability, if you will, at the recycle centers, because it doesn't get contaminated or drenched in rain, so it's a step forward.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, but they're all bailed up at the end of the day and put on the trucks. And a lot of them do get rejected from the inspection companies.
Well, that's exactly
They
right.
really do. And one other good thing that has come out about China not taking this, last year, a company up in Detroit started building a brand new plant. So we're starting to see some of that happen in the country. And that's good.
Yes.
But I think education is a big thing because I used to throw the Bobcats away, but you're not supposed to do that.
I know.
And now I don't.
Yeah, which is frustrating because for those of us who want to recycle everything possible, we confound the system, and I've been guilty of that in the past. And when I went to the facility, I was scolded several times when they said, "No, you don't do that. That you're not helping us." So I get it. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. Okay. Yes, Christy.
Our committee has already had 2 seminars which are available to be viewed on just with Patty Lynch, the Chester County Waste Management Authority. And so those are available to be viewed. We're going to be doing a lot more with the newsletter, and we're going to start, with Jason's help, some little Twitter feeds, et cetera, that will clarify these points about what can and can't be. And we're looking at resources for bottles, et cetera. We're not waiting for a federal program. We're trying to find resources too.
That's great, Christy. Maybe we freshen up the front page of the website and just make reference to those sustainability
Those links.
videos that are available.
Yeah. I'm just going to comment though. I'm surprised that we didn't have a higher percentage of respondents to that survey, considering one of the requirements was you had to participate in the survey. And the reason I didn't participate in the survey is because the toter was too large for our family. It takes up way too much real estate in our home. So I gave it to a neighbor and made them agree to do the survey. So I'm going to check and make sure they did the survey.
Well, this is all very informative. Again, this is incremental. It's a step, but we have a motion and
a
I
second.
think there was a second. No further questions, comments. I would call for a vote to authorize staff.
Aye.
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 All right, 4-0. Carried. Carry on. Let's see, next item is Mark Miller is here. This is consider replacing 2 fully depreciated pickup trucks and 1 fully depreciated dump truck. Mark Miller has presented a summary of the cost and the CoStar's vendors' prices. And these are not 2021 purchases because of the supply-demand issues that have developed over the past year. The outlay or the ordering for these new trucks are 8 to 10 months out. So this would be a 2022 budget item under capital. And Mark, if you would comment, or Dave, comment on the relationship to the capital reserve fund, whether the depreciation of these trucks is wasting elements and that sort of thing. Wasting assets, rather.
Yeah, they are. It's a little bit misleading for those who are familiar with some accounting terms. Depreciating is more of a tax term to use. So it's really an accumulated capital replacement. So we're putting aside money over 10 years for these trucks. It's been started since 2014, 2013. For each of these over 10 years, we're even beyond that on 1 or 2. And adding it up, we put aside $96,927 for the one where Mark has for Fred Beans netting out at $96,996. So that one's only $50 short when we net out, and $168,668 was put away for the one, the dump truck, which was would be $155,29. So they're fully reserved in the capital fund.
Mark, any comments on these relative to anything you've discovered in the process with getting the vendors? I know you've talked about the indicated prices likely going up, et cetera, and to get the orders in. They're fully, these include the full snow removal equipment. They would be fitted out with all the full snow removal equipment. 2 pickup trucks are nickel and diamonds now with engine repairs. And anybody, Ford, you have to actually take the cab off the truck to get to the engine. And we've had a boat down there numerous times for problems. We got some of it covered under warranty. We got kind of stretched that out a little bit. And as for the dump truck that we're replacing, it was took a couple big heavy hits this winter, plowing snow. And the axle is, it's time for them to go.
How old are they? Do we have that?
Yeah, the dump truck will be 16 years old, and the 2 pickup will be 10 years old.
And Mark, at this point in time, do you need if for consideration of this motion, do you need any authorization to use Unibid to sell the others, or is that down the road?
We'll do that when the trucks are out.
Okay, all right, great. Municipal. Fellow supervisors, any comments on this? Is there an interest to authorize the ordering of these vehicles in anticipation of 2022 budget and receipt?
Mr. Vice Chair, I'll recommend the purchase of 2 pickup trucks to Fred Bean in the amount of $146,996. Wow, it's getting to be late. And the purchase of the dump truck to J.L. Sayre in the amount of $200,529.
Second on that.
I'll second that.
Any further questions? David, any question from you?
No, I understand that these are fully depreciated and that they'll be paid for in 2022, but ordered now because of the lag time, so I get that, and I'm good.
All right, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Do we want?
Oh, any public comment on this matter of these purchases and this order for future delivery in 2022? Hearing none, then I would call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. 4-0. Thanks very much. Mark, thank you.
Thank you.
Consider passing resolution for the Deer Management Program 2021-22. Mark, I don't know whether you want to comment on this one. You prepared a memorandum for us. The program, as far as I know, has been successful, at least by way of, I haven't heard anything about complaints. The program seems to be functioning very effectively in the various properties. So it seems like a continuation, but go ahead.
Yeah, all four groups are just amazing partners with their neighboring residents. All but one group have resident members, so they're very involved in the community, and they have friends and family in the communities. So great bunch of guys. They've been these four groups have been with us, I think, all of them from the beginning, except for one group that came on, I think, in the 3rd year. So a lot of guys, great experience, and good community partners. They do their own trash collection in every open space area, and Mark's guys pick up all the garbage when they're done, and they do it without even me asking. So,
and each one of these four groups provided a very professional letter of responses to what their program is doing, their commitment. So that speaks to itself.
They're all harvesting white-tailed deer in their communities, and most of them are even donating some of that meat to the local food kitchens in the fall and winter months when they use venison to supplement their protein at the food cupboards. So a good bunch of guys.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does any money change hands here? Okay, does our association with these groups mean that I can't hunt on my property?
No, sir.
So I could go out with a bow and arrow and...
That's true. In the state of Pennsylvania, you can hunt on your own private property as long as you can meet the safety setbacks. in the rear of your property, you back up to one of the whitetail areas, one of the open space areas, you can even ask those members if you wanted to have control, some additional control, they could actually hunt on your property, expand the open space area to include yours and neighboring properties. I've had residents do that, reach out to the group and say, hey, can you include our properties? Because they're leaving the open space and coming eating all my hostas and tearing up my entire garden. If I could hunt in my backyard, I would have plenty of deer because they eat all my tomatoes. I know when they come,
I have the same stories. I have the same stories. Okay.
But no, it's good. It's a free program for them, but they do provide a great service. And I think our numbers show that the deer-human interactions and conflicts have gone down with vehicle accidents. Those of you who don't know, anyone who gets hit a deer, it's traumatic and it can be very threatening to life and limb. And we have a couple residents who have been paralyzed for life because they've swerved to miss a deer. So never swerve, hit the deer.
Yeah, and you're, on
the deer kill on the road, just the other, it was this past week off of 352 at Fairway Village. I don't know whether you noticed it, but it couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 days old. It was just tough to see it on the side of the road dead before it even got to start. So there is a value in culling the population and
My daughters used to cry when they saw that, so I started telling them that the deer was only sleeping.
It
worked.
We had to drag one
Good job,
out of a neighbor's property in Wilpen Farms the other day, had all 4 broken legs.
See, that's tough.
We had to dispatch it and we drug it to the road.
Yeah.
It really is. Mr. Vice Chair, I move we approve the 2021-22 DMP resolution 2021-24, and the following deer management groups to participate in the 2021 Township Archery Hunting Program. The Chester County Trackers will manage the Grand Oak and Mill Creek open space area. Mainline Whitetail Managers will manage the Spca open space area. Keystone Archers will manage the Bow Tree and Clock Tower open space. Tri-County Whitetail Management will manage the Wentworth open space area.
Second motion.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a second. Any further comment, any public comment on this matter? I would then call the question and the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 4 to 0. Thank you, David. All right, folks. Next, we have a couple of stormwater operation and maintenance agreements. These are, there are 2 of them recommended by staff, one for 103 Rossmore Drive and 632 North Chester Road. They've reviewed these projects and agreements, and they're recommending the board authorize the chair, or in this case, the vice chair, to sign the agreements.
Mr. Vice Chair, I move the board authorize the Vice Chair to sign the stormwater management, chair or vice chairman to sign the stormwater management operation and maintenance agreements for 103 Rossmore Drive and 632 North Chester Drive.
Second that motion.
All right. Any questions, any comments? Not, I'll call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thanks, folks, for that one. Let's see, we have a matter that is consider use of the township-owned 2019 Red Explorer, the pool car, that's P-O-L-E car, by the township manager.
Mr. Chairman, I wrote a memo about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Pretty self-explanatory in the memo, but just seeking to get authorization to use a pool car that we have here already purchased and fully bought in the manner that I outlined in the memo. So seeking authorization for that.
Yes, I think the way you presented it, I'm supportive of it. It is, you do have a 24/7 position, so I respect that you were on call all the time, back and forth, being able to use the vehicle. I'm supportive of that, but I'll open it up to questions from my fellow supervisors on any of this, John or David or Michelle.
I don't have any questions.
No questions? This is a matter, this is a staff matter where we have a vehicle available. It has been customary for the manager of municipalities in Chester County, but throughout the municipal government, to have access to a vehicle other than their own car. Again, the municipal manager is on call essentially, as I say, 24/7, and they're working more than 40 hours a week. So this is a reasonable use of a vehicle that is not that's available, and it will be available here during the day. So if there are any questions on that, there, in this case, the manager will be providing for the fuel for the vehicle, but using the vehicle that's here as a township vehicle to accommodate.
Mr. Vice Chair, I move that we allow the township manager to use the township-owned 2019 red Ford Explorer pool car for township business as well as to and from work.
Second? Yeah.
Second the motion.
All right.
With the proviso that Derek and I have agreed that he's not gonna put a bobblehead in it or nose and deck it.
No, the only decal can be in East Goshen Township.
That's all right, that's all right.
Maybe East High School, something like that.
I would agree to those stipulations.
Are there any questions? David, any questions from you?
I don't have any questions.
All right, I will call the motion.
Do we have any public comment
Oh,
on this?
excuse me, any public comment on this one? Hearing none, I call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye, is that John? Was that an aye?
Yep.
Yep.
Definitely was.
All right, thank you for that, folks. There is any other matter, and I think, Michelle, did you mention that you had an any other matter?
No, actually, the only other matter I had was just to let everybody know, I can let everybody know again though. Marty Shane, you'll notice, is not with us this evening. He is recovering from an infection, and he won't be with us for a little bit of time. I'm not sure quite when he'll be back, but he's making improvement daily, a little bit of improvement daily.
Thanks, Michelle. And John, anything from you or David? Anything under any other matter that is of interest to share?
No, we wish the best to Marty.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We want him back on his feet.
David was saying something.
Oh, David, go ahead.
No, I don't have anything, Mike, thank you.
All right. And how about, we're at this point in the meeting with any public comment. We've got a few minutes to hear any public comment. So I'll open the floor to anyone that would like to come up and offer comment. Okay.
I would like to make a comment.
Yes, sir.
Again, Brian Hutchinson.
Yes, sir, Brian.
1429 Cooper Circle. I just wanted to publicly thank Mark Gordon and the code officers at East Goshen. July 5th, I had my existing 5K solar system expanded, and the 6 additional panels were installed on that Monday, July 5th. And the next day, my solar vendor informed me that the code officer, Vincent, would be arriving on Wednesday morning, almost less than 48 hours after these panels had been installed. I want to thank them for doing such an expedient job. Last year, when they had the original system put in, it was operational back on October. It did take probably around a week or so. And I know that the township has worked steadfastly to adopt the Soul Smart program to help the code enforcement officers in the township decrease the amount of time necessary to install that and to provide the certification. And I even got the certificate of occupancy about an hour after Vincent was up looking at the panel. So I want to congratulate Mark Gordon and the rest of the code enforcement officers.
Nice report. The staff always appreciates hearing that, Brian, and may the sun shine warmly on your solar panels.
Mr. Hutchinson should be commended too, because he was the reason that the township sought the amendment to the solar ordinance.
Ah, Very good.
Because he made some really great points, and we looked at it closely. We were going through the Souls part at the time and said, look, why do we have these additional requirements? What are these dimensional, what do they mean? And they were just kind of arbitrary numbers, and we have a fire code, why don't we go with that? Well, that made total sense, those guys write books on these things, so we just went with that, and it's made the process much easier. We've gotten a lot of solar in during the pandemic. It's been a very, very big permit item. I think we've probably done a dozen or so this year already, so it's, and it seems to be, I don't know if there's subsidy out there right now or not, but it's very lucrative for the homeowners.
And it's great to see that investment, and so back at you, Brian Hutchinson, good response. Michelle, I know you guys are very active with the solar. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, one last comment for this evening. This morning, I stopped by the Chester County Commissioners meeting, and maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but they sent a letter to the PUC about the situation that's going on in West Whiteland Township, where the numerous sinkholes continue to open up, where Energy Transfer is attempting to install the pipelines right between the Chester County Library and the neighborhood known as Meadowbrook Manor. The action was, the letter sent by the commissioners to the PUC was a long time in coming, but very welcome, because the sinkholes are opening literally within just a few feet of the active 8-inch and the old leaky 12-inch workaround pipelines. The comment that I made at the meeting this morning was that I'm a resident of East Goshen Township, but I commute through West Goshen Township right by the Boot Road pump station, which has had 2 incidents. And I work in West Whiteland Township, very close to the area where these sinkholes are occurring. So I'm literally in a blast zone 24 hours a day. But my experience is not unique. And many of our residents share the same experience. So while people may not live directly near the pipeline or as close to it as I do, we live, work, commute, shop in areas that are hazard zones, that are very dangerous. So not asking you to support or send a letter or anything like that, but perhaps just consider writing a letter similar to what the commissioners did to the PUC, because now would be the time to do it. They just sent their letter yesterday.
Why don't you share that letter with us, or give us a copy so we can see it there?
Or get back to the pipeline task force and have them.
Yeah,
Make a
go through
recommendation.
the task force. I think that's good, and that way we have that direct interface that we
It won't be as timely, but I can send it to Derek and he can distribute it to you. It did
Okay.
Yesterday.
All right, Christina.
Okay, thanks.
All right, good suggestion.
Mike, I did have one more comment
Michelle.
too, while Russ is coming up. I am going to be going down to Sunoco Energy Transfer next week. I wanted to be on the record publicly that I'm going down to see their control room, and I'll be meeting with one of their directors. This is not something that I'm going to ask for reimbursement for from the township. I'm going on my own dime, and I'm not going to take anything from Sunoco if it's more than bottled water that's offered. I'm not beholden to them. I'm just simply going down to see their control room and see their operations. And I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that I'm doing that on my own dime, and apparently I'm the first township official who's ever taken them up on their offer.
Michelle, I appreciate you
Sharing that, and just for the benefit of those in attendance and those listening, the operations, the monitoring of these pipelines in our immediate community are done remotely. Obviously, the technology is available so that this operational monitoring center that you're going to be in Houston is what is watching the pipeline in many elements of it on a minute-by-minute basis. Obviously, there's response here. There are people in the vicinity if an immediate response is necessary, and we've seen that occurs. But that is the nature of it. It is a remote operating facility that is 1,700 miles away, monitoring pipelines in our own community. So I think it's great you're going to go down there, and they may use it as a PR opportunity, but I'm sure you will be effective in listening and learning and sharing. When
I can use it as a PR opportunity as well.
There you go. There you go. Well, thanks for sharing that. Let's see, we have Russ Frank next. Go ahead, sir.
I'd like to talk about the giant elephant in the township, the Hicks Farms. There was a study that's been done, a poll, I should say. Residents that have entered the poll have voted 6-1 against taking eminent domain issues against the Hicks Farm. That's a pretty large percentage of differences. You guys have voted to go through that process of taking the eminent domain. With all the chatter that's been going on the past couple of weeks, the past week, I should say, is there any chance that you guys could reevaluate your decision earlier to do this?
Oh, I can't speak, but for myself as one supervisor, Russ, I will share with you some comments. I think, did I respond to you in an email? Oh, no, it was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Gordon. I responded to there he is. But I think I offered you a response, Mr. Gordon. Excuse me, Gordon Davis. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Forgive me. I will share with you my perspective on this. I'm looking at this. First of all, I'm sorry that the eminent domain was used. I take no glee in the use of it. It's a powerful tool, and I believe that from my perspective, the township worked in good faith to try and address a lot of the items that the Hicks family was interested in, to try and make sure that there were no negative effects long-term on their equestrian operation or ingress and egress to the farm. And as I've indicated with a number of email responses, we offered to put in a double row fence, extensive landscaping, an electric fence or electric gate, and electric service. The total of those estimates were just about in excess of the actual compensation offered through appraisals for the easements of 8,500 square feet on the one property and about 12,500 on the other property. My decision is also looking forward. We are a fully suburbanized community. Trails, I think, are an important part of a strong community and a future-looking community. Is it a trail to nowhere? No, I believe it's a trail to a point that is per the plan that was approved back in 2018, I think it was, or 2017. It is to implement the trail per the plan as a foundation spine east to west through the township, with the incremental steps in the future to look for north-south connections, is a valued asset for not just the present community in these next number of years ahead, but in the future generation. That said, this section B is the most complicated section of the trail. It's the last section. We've completed the other sections. The final section, the small section between Airport Road and the Hicks properties, is under construction in some capacity, and that's a small section will be completed. All the other easements were obtained without any further accoutrements or offerings. And this was an unfortunate situation that had broken down, but we've invested to date over $600,000 in the engineering of this section of the trail. And I have said in a number of my emails that, and I think I just said it to you most recently, Gordon, that I don't expect, looking forward to the tenure of the board, perhaps as we hit the next generation of the board starting in January 2022, that section of the trail is going to be built anytime in the near future. However, after investing $600,000 in that trail, looking at the plan, looking at the future of the community, I believe to not obtain the easements, whether they're used now to complete the section or not used until a future thinking board or a community 10, 20 years down the road decides they may want to complete that section, I felt that was necessary to obtain the easements. Now, that said, an alternate route may be possible, but also you've got an existing trail there now that on a section of Paoli Pike that is very concerning with high volume traffic, potential for more pedestrian activity because of the trail, and that section not being completed may provide some implication to the ability of people to navigate where there is no shoulder, to either make their way toward using the trail, make their way towards the YMCA or East High School or wherever they're going, points east or west. We actually do have an ordinance that in the determination of the township, if there is a potential safety issue along highways, et cetera, that the township can require a sidewalk to be built in that very section. And in fact, the burden would be on the property owner to pay for the sidewalk. That's an alternative. It's in the ordinances. I'm not interested in that per se, but with where we've come, I'm disappointed. I'm sorry, but I'm adamant, if you will, and committed to the fact that the easement, as we've seeking to acquire them, was necessary going forward in the future. Again, whether this section of the trail is built now, anytime in these next few years, or not for another generation. I hate to use the example, but no different than the Sunoco pipeline. They've had their easements in place for 70 years to now implement them for their own devices. But I think looking forward for the future, I think it's important. I think the trail is going to be more than a recreational trail in the next 25 years. With e-bikes and others, I think there's connectivity looking ahead towards West Goshen. Alternative trail routes possible, but given where we are at this point in the investment that we put into this section, it would be, to me, fiscally irresponsible just on the point of the money we've invested to not at least secure the easements, whether they're used now or in a future generation. I don't want to get too far into it, but suburbanization has occurred in East Goshen Township. We are fully suburbanized. And I don't want to make this sound negative, but the Hickses have had to make decisions to divest of some of their farm property to the YMCA, to a bank, to developers. And there's no preservation easement on the current Hicks farm. So we don't know what will happen to the Hicks farm in 5 years or 10 years. It could be a legacy gem that lives on through a conservation easement or an agricultural preservation easement. It will live on forever, at least the view shed of it and the protection of it through an easement, a permanent conservation easement. But without that conservation easement, the farm could be for sale for development anytime in the next generation, and that would change the landscape as well. Right. So those are some of my thoughts. I recognize that folks may not agree with that, but I'm looking ahead for the township and I'm considering the investment that's already been made. So those are kind of some of my thoughts, Russ.
Okay, but now, part of this investment that you referred to is connecting to other townships. And Derek, I think you were from West Goshen? Last I looked at the West Goshen site a few months ago, there was no plans for 2021, 2022, I think, to build the trail. Now, if they are going to build the trail, how and where is it going to connect to our trail?
There's, in the 2019 comprehensive plan, there was a trail in West Goshen, in the municipality of West Goshen, I believe it went down Airport Road and connected to, was it Ward? Yeah.
Came out of Ward,
Yeah.
came across the park and out of Ward.
Correct, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think Airport Road goes the other way. So yeah, it goes Ward, like past the UPS and all that, towards Arbor Square and then the Arbors and around the Township building and then towards West Ocean Shopping Center into the borough that way.
Where's it gonna connect to R to the Y?
Down Airport Road.
Well, down, well, there wasn't, the connectivity stops at Ward, so it's sort of left to future devices to figure that out. So I don't think they wanted to tie in anything or tie a future board into anything. But it's a little bit of a different situation in West Goshen where the easements, I think, that would have to be secured in West Goshen. If you look at the tight residential properties going along Paley Pike, sort of a non-starter. So there is a plan. To answer your other question, it hasn't been talked about recently internally in the last, year or two that I was there.
And my last question is, the grants that we got from Pennsylvania, is there any tie into those grants that we have to do something to promote more apartment living, Section 8 living?
Russ, I don't think.
No, any connection whatsoever with anything tying into that kind of a red tape, that would be something that we would have probably not accepted the grants had we had that kind of a
I saw a few news stories on it, that's the reason why.
No, I'm not familiar with it, but no, so, to my knowledge, nothing in these grants tie us to any requirement to implement any kind of housing or anything else associated with it.
Thank you.
Thank you, bro.
Just really quick. Hi, I'm Jen Hicks, 1325 Paley Pike. Why, and I'm curious, why would you spend $600,000 on planning without talking to us at all?
Well, I'm not gonna be able
To answer in detail, except that the advanced work on the trail was also tied into the grants that we were trying to secure. So in other words, to apply for the grants, we had to show that we were advancing this trail through engineering and soft costs to at least do the preliminary work. In this case, the Section B is the most complicated because we have wetlands crossing and a bridge necessary with it. And the grant tours, DCED, and I think it was Federal Highway. I think we have a federal grant as well, if I'm not mistaken. Both these fellows are new. That we had to show in order to obtain a grant that we were advancing, not necessarily shovel ready, but we had a good bit of the engineering done. And part of the shovel ready actually has to do with showing that we had the easements in place as well. And that is tied into, for instance, our application for grants coming up in, if not this month or later on this year, two grant applications, which I don't know what the status of those are going to be now, given the tenor of the board and our split thinking on this. But that's part of it. So there was an earlier investment tied into the grants to show that we were committed to advancing the trail. I will say this, some of the earlier correspondence I had looked at, particularly with I think coming from one of your family members, it might have been Linda, there were comments about access, but there wasn't much other comment that I saw relative to, for instance, the equestrian operation, which raised a lot of concern. I've looked into that extensively, talked to the County Planning Commission, the County Open Space Department. I can find no studies associated with trails and equestrian operations
The trail you
and
brought up
impact.
at the other meeting.
Well,
That
David
was
brought that one.
completely
David, if you're on the line with that Arabian stallion
Yeah,
location, David?
that was
You
in
there?
the woods, it was completely, we checked
Yeah, lost
into
him.
it.
Well, he's not on the line. But at any rate, that's why we those funds were expended. It was tied into showing the commitment we had with the trail. They've seen the plan with our intent. They've seen the sections already completed. So that was part of it. So that's where some of the funds were spent.
So as a family, and I'm going to speak for the family, I hear that you spent that money no discussion happened with the family at all. I wish that we had
Mm.
talked back then. I
Mm.
really do, because
Mm.
what I'm seeing is you went on this side of us and that side of us and bought the land, and I feel you had eminent domain in your mind back then.
Mm.
And
No,
so
not I.
it just,
I didn't.
that's,
No.
I'm.
No, I'll unequivocally say to you, wasn't even in my mind. In fact, we were, as a board, hopefully we're cautiously optimistic as we were trying to negotiate. Of course, Kristen's not here. That we were trying to address the concerns you had and the extensive
Yes,
improvements. So
statements.
eminent domain was the last thing. I don't think it was ever even brought up. It started to be obviously a conversation when the discussions we had were breaking down, but
I
think
that started to become an issue when they had the lines spray painted at Philip's insistence. It seemed that was when the breakdown occurred,
It was
when
in one of our first meetings at the end of the driveway as a family, but, so the alternate route, it makes, put aside the money you already spent. If you took that route, it would bring you out to the corporate center and it would attach to West Goshen in the future much easier. And the family is willing to donate that land. It would save so much money on so many avenues. And we are asking that you please consider, because you're changing on top of safety for the trail users, the horses, whatever you think about horses or not,
I like
safety,
horses.
but you're not seeing our concern, I feel, but pulling in and out of our driveway just on an average day, summertime's nice, but it is so dangerous. We have horses with trailers, we have us, and watching for vehicles is hard enough. Now watching for pedestrians, bikers, moms with the little kids, coming from the Y to see their pony, this is a huge, please hear me, it's huge. It's a huge concern.
I hear you.
Please
Listen.
consider
The
other
alternate route,
alternate.
I am very supportive of an alternate route, but as I said, and I can't speak for my colleagues who voted for the eminent domain and the acquisition of the easements. I can only speak for myself, that the investment we've made, whether or not that section is ever built, with what we've already invested in it, to invest the additional amount to secure the easements for the future, that section may never be built, but we'll have the easements if in some future generation, whether the farm is no longer in existence, that trail could be completed. In the meantime, if there's an alternate route, I'm all of interest in it. So there's no doubt about it. I think we've got a long ways to go. You may very well be in a particular, I'm not going to get into a legal discussion per se, but you're considering your options.
We just want you to hear us, please.
I do hear you, and again, I'll be frank with you. I've said it to my colleagues who have a divergent opinion. I think the administration of the board will be changing. I'm sorry, I got turned on, making noise. I think the administration will be changing in January, and so those votes, if you will probably change. And I don't think that section is going to be built. But in the meantime, I want to see that easement secured for the future generation, if nothing else. It won't impact you per se. Maybe the farm will sell at some point in the future unless you put a conservation easement on it. If you don't and it sells for development, then we'll have the easement in place and that trail may become quite relevant and valuable. And in fact, the developer might complete the trail for the township. So that's looking forward. In the meantime, great. Be pleased to open up a conversation on an alternate trail and see where we can go with it. But
We're opening that conversation, Mike, and I think it is possible that we could negotiate a settlement that will be acceptable to all parties. But we're only at the beginning of that.
Yeah, I agree.
Michelle and I, of course, are against eminent domain, but we've, out of courtesy to the other three members of the board, we've laid back because Marty went into the hospital a week ago. And we didn't think it would be fair to start trying to call questions that would come up 2 against 2.
I respect that.
And I appreciate that. But we have not given up on what I have referred to as the Hicks-Truitt alternative. So hopefully we can make a little progress on that front. And Mike has been reasonable about this. If we can do something there, I think maybe we can make everybody happy.
In all fairness, in all fairness, I have to say, if David is not with us, David has been also supportive of an alternate trail. And he has told me, he'd like both, but, he is interested in an alternate
Well, and maybe
plan.
East High School
I can,
and.
Oh, there you go.
For myself.
Oh, there you go,
Is that
David.
Mark?
Sorry, Dave, no, that was David.
I'm in the,
We thought you were lost there.
I think Mike articulated my position perfectly. I have no idea how many easements and landowners, we have along the alternate route that Michelle, I mean, I know it's through the business park, but that land is also owned by a lot of different people. And we've never discussed easements with any of those people, so, I would entertain an alternate, but I agree with Mike that we need to acquire the easements across the Bailey Pike for future, generations. We don't know what's gonna happen. I waited patiently for 15 years to get the Chester Valley Trail completed so I could enjoy that, so, I think that, we made a commitment to that trail and it needs to be done.
Thanks, David. Okay, oh, yes, sir.
Sorry, David, I didn't mean to speak for you. I just thought that we had lost you there.
Yes, sir.
Mark Kolecki, 1446 Cherry. So, two questions. One, to what extent was jogging the trail back across Beverly Pike given to avoid the Hicks Farm and go down the school property side of Beverly Pike?
I don't know the details of that. I know I've heard it discussed. Mark, can you provide any background? I know looking at the trail on the other side, I remember there was a discussion that the trail literally would have been literally in the backyards, right up near the front of several residences. I'm not sure where the school district fell out on it. Maybe you can elaborate for us.
So along this southern side of Haley Pike, that's where you mean?
Yeah.
With the jug handle at what we call the lovingly the triangle where our sign is, becomes very problematic. Keeping everything on the south side would have been problematic traffic-wise at the Haley Pike intersection, number one. Number two, the Meadows development, a lot of rear yards. The trail would have been right at people's decks in the backyard, would have been right on top of them. So that was a challenge. The school district, again, was a challenge. A lot more challenges on the south side than there was on the north side. We also already had easements with the corporate park. There was already a partial easement there for township purpose. We just expanded it a little bit so that we could meet PennDOT safety requirements.
Mark, can I ask a question about that? Because I was wondering if there was a consideration to having the trail on the south side starting at Ellis and utilizing the public school property, since it would.
That's what I'm considering.
Right, so I'm wondering
Just
if.
have to jog over where the wetlands are, somewhere in that vicinity, and just
Right.
use the school property.
So I was wondering, is there any way that we can have a diagonal pedestrian bridge to connect to the Acero connection? That's what I figured.
PennDOT will not do it.
For what reason?
They don't do mid-block crossings, period, on busy roads like that.
That's not our road, I think.
That's a
No,
state road.
it's a state road. Bailey Pike is a state road.
Oh, we have a mid-block crossing in the park.
We did, yes. Yeah, we got good.
We do.
Yes, we do. We do, and we did get permits from PennDOT, and it was very labor intensive, but they realized because of the active park, the number of people, it's also it's at a good spot where it's high, where you can see both ways. But yes, you're right. We do have one, but it was very difficult to secure.
So it's easier to exercise eminent domain than to apply for a permit with PennDOT to get a crossing there?
No, so when our discussions with PennDOT safety, through the initial investigation of the feasibility of the trail, they basically said, no mid-block crossing here because of the tightness of the roadway, and safety just would not pass it. There's a bunch of different divisions you have to go through, and safety is always the toughest.
Sure.
And of course, they don't want pedestrians crossing in very narrow, very busy areas.
But aren't there crosswalks in that vicinity already
At
because of the
intersections, at intersections.
Okay.
There's no intersections.
So 50 yards up from there, it's dangerous to have a crosswalk, but 50 yards down is okay. Just so I understand.
I don't know what you're talking about.
50 yards up where the school property starts, it's dangerous, but 50 yards down, it's safe.
Oh, there's a light.
Just so I
There's
understand.
there's nowhere 50 yards that there's going to be a crossing.
Okay.
Yeah, no, there, it just, yeah,
But the
no, he's
bottom
right,
line
it wouldn't work.
We're gonna be looking into, clearly, we're gonna have discussion about an alternative trail. And again, I'm coming back to the conversation we've had here about the easements and the eminent domain. I'm not pleased with using eminent domain, but securing the easements, I don't think that section's gonna be built anytime soon. We may have an alternate, but the easements will be there.
Well-
We've invested in it, period. I mean, I really have nothing else to say. We're gonna go where we're gonna go.
I have one follow-up question. So there's been an offer of land as an alternative to the land that you want to exercise eminent domain on. If there's a negotiation, a successful negotiation to use that presented alternative, would you surrender the easements that you currently have for the land that you?
That's a big question, and my answer right now would be no, but it's a big question, and we've agreed as a board, we're gonna discuss it.
That becomes a negotiation.
Yeah, there you go. So we're not gonna get into negotiation, but it's a good question, and we'll discuss it. But right now.
It's a good question,
my
fair
answer is
question.
no.
I wasn't trying to negotiate.
Oh,
No,
no,
I
but
was
it's
just trying to-
an excellent question.
We're starting to get into some of the details of where we're hopefully gonna go as a board.
Yeah,
and
excellent
probably-
question.
So we'll see, but.
But your long-term of 10, 20 years is different than their long-term of 100 years or 150 years or however long they've been on the property. So there's different views of what long-term is.
Oh, yeah, well, I could play the long term as well with trails, because in the next 100 years, I think trails are gonna be even more important. So,
I understand.
so, you know, we're talking, and that's a good thing. But my position about the easements, I've explained that, and that's kind of where I stand. Again, for Marty, David commented as well. I don't know where they will come out on, but we're gonna have more discussions. I think that's what we agreed on.
Okay.
All right, thanks
Thanks
very
very
much.
much.
Okay.
One last.
Yes, ma'am.
I have more of a question than a comment.
Yeah.
As I've been reading a lot about the issue, one recurring question keeps coming in my mind, and that is the actual definition of what this project is. There's interchangeability, I think, between the use of the term trail, and I'm wondering, what does the actual grant or permit application say? Is it a sidewalk or is it a trail? Because
It's a multimodal,
trail.
it's a multimodal trail.
And that's the actual word that's used.
It's a multimodal trail.
Share the documents with Christina and Mark.
Mark, I'm not incorrect on that, am I?
No, you're not. I think probably what Christine, you might have seen is the easements are called sidewalk easement. And that's legally, that's what we have to call it. And that's sidewalk easement. There's also the temporary construction easement and there's signal easements. Those are the three different easements that we're securing. But the trail is for multimodal trail, which means obviously, different twins.
Okay, so yeah, the reason why I'm asking that is because sidewalks and trails have different specifications and different uses. And this goes to the point of what you were just saying. When David was describing the trails, how trails and horses coexist, trails can often be unpaved trails that are in a open field landscape, typical of what you see out in Brandywine Creek State Park and things like that. They are not subject to ADA requirements. And so that's what you see hikers and bikers on and things like that. That is the definition of a trail. When you talk about a sidewalk has to be ADA compliant. And also, bikes are not allowed on sidewalks unless there is traffic signaling devices. Am I correct, Mark?
I don't know all the rules around what's allowed on sidewalks and trails, but.
I looked up the PennDOT
But
rules.
trails can be ADA required as well, so.
So I would just, the reason why I'm going down this pathway is because I feel like these terms are being used interchangeably. And so if it is in fact a sidewalk that's being built on that easement, I think
No,
that.
it's not a sidewalk, it's not a sidewalk. We could require a
I would
sidewalk
like
to be put there, Christine. What?
Okay,
It's not a sidewalk.
I just want that.
It's multimodal trail. That's the great.
Multimodal.
We have an ordinance
You can ride a bike on it.
We have an ordinance that says because of safety reasons, the board could make a determination that a sidewalk be installed there irrespective. No easements, no grants, et cetera. We could just simply say, and we could require a property owner to put in the sidewalk for safety reasons.
Right,
Period.
and tax assessments are linked to whether it's a sidewalk or a trail. So that's why I'm asking. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, just to
Yes,
add
sir.
one more thing, to address one of Mrs. Hicks' comments. So in the beginning, as they say, in the beginning, 2011, we were part of the county, trail plan. So, and this concept came about. Then the board decided to expand that into the Bailey Pike Trail. So we looked at a feasibility study. The Hickses were invited and they attended in 2011, I believe. And they were here and they were part of it. So we, from the very beginning, we invited every stakeholder along the trail to come to that meeting. And we had a big turnout. So the township was proactive about community engagement at the very beginning. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone in the audience knew that.
Thanks, Mark. Board members, anything else that you might want to add for this evening?
I think we don't have any
No
liaison
liaison
reports.
reports.
And I think
That there's correspondence.
Yeah, correspondence, and that is in the, that was posted on the website, so if you want to link into the right to know report, some kudos that were sent to Public Works, I believe, you can read those.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Did I do a second?
Second.
Okay, I'll third. David, you in favor of that? What do you care? You're around Connecticut. All right, so be it. The meeting is adjourned. Thanks very much, folks. Appreciate it. Chris, thank you. Derek, thank you. Mark, thanks for being here. Yes, sir. John, thank you.
It's hard to do it to me, you know?
I'm terrible. So we need to sign.
Listen, you're gonna have to read that one. You want me to.
I don't.
I'm more Philip.
Hi, it's nice to meet you. I never met you either. It's nice to meet you. Thank you.
Oh, you got my name right. You know, and if you're gonna spell it once, just make sure you have the alpha one. I like alpha one myself. Okay. When do you head down, Michelle?
I'm leaving on Wednesday next week.
Hope you have a safe
It's 8:30 in the morning. And
Did they give you an answer to sign or not sign the waiver?
actually,
I'll send you George's.
Okay.
Good luck.